Laughter, clear and bright, accompanied by the sound of thunder, resonated throughout the heavens and earth. The buzzing reverberated across the land, immediately drawing the attention of countless strong warriors from the ongoing battles in this area. Those from the Great Luo Heaven Domain, whose morale had been crushed by the defeat of the Golden Guard, suddenly found their spirits lifted. It's the 9 Nether Guards. The forces of the 9 Nether Palace have finally arrived. I heard they previously defeated the Thunder Demon Palace. Now this is good. That sound must be from Commander Mu Chun of the 9 Nether Guards. With him here, we don't have to fear Lin Qingfeng. Whispers spread across the sky, and many warriors from the Great Luo Heaven Domain side began to show signs of relief. In less than half a year, nearly every powerful figure from the Great Luo Heaven Domain had heard of the 9 Nether Guards, a force that had risen with incredible speed. Similarly, they were all familiar with their new leader, Mu Chun, who had led the 9 Nether Guards to prominence. Up in the sky, Lin Qingfeng narrowed his eyes and looked in that direction. In the distance, it seemed as if dark clouds were gathering, and soon, a cold, murderous aura filled the air as they appeared before him. It was an army clad in black armor. Their war intent, dark as a flood, howled through the air. The sound of thunder seemed to reverberate faintly from their ranks, and the entire army stood silently in the sky, exuding an imposing aura that made it impossible to underestimate them. The 9 Nether Guards of the 9 Nether Palace, huh? I've heard of them recently, Lin Qingfeng said with a faint smile, his eyes narrowing as he gazed at the black-clad army. I've heard that the 3,000 sword servants of the Valley of 10,000 Swords are extraordinary. Now that I see them for myself, the rumors turn out to be true. Mu Chun appeared in the air above the 9 Nether Guards. Smiling slightly, he looked at the man in the green robe, Lin Qingfeng, and said, "You must be the new commander of the 9 Nether Palace, Mu Chun, right?" Lin Qingfeng said, fixing his gaze on Mu Chun. "I've heard that you not only defeated your own Blood Eagle Guards, but even the Thunder Demon Legion of the Thunder Demon sect was also defeated by you?" Mu Chun smiled, glancing at the chaotic Golden Guards not far off. "Commander Lin, with the constant battles, perhaps it's best if you take your people and leave for now." You want to save someone?" Lin Qingfeng smiled playfully, then casually flicked the sword on his back, looking at Mu Chun with a smile. "You can save someone, but I'm afraid you might end up getting yourself involved." Though Lin Qingfeng had heard of the 9 Nether Guards' recent accomplishments, it clearly didn't pressure him. After all, no matter what, he was the leader of the Valley of 10,000 Swords. Throughout the 100 Battles domain, there were only a handful of leaders who could rival him. Although the 3,000 sword servants weren't all present with him now, he had enough presence and authority to look down on other leaders. "You're right, Commander Lin," Mu Chun chuckled, nodding. He naturally understood that, with Lin Qingfeng's reputation in the 100 Battles domain, it would be impossible to save anyone by mere words. And since words wouldn't work, he would use his fists. A cold light suddenly flashed in Mu Chun's dark eyes. Without hesitation, he stomped his foot, and the 9 Nether Guards roared in unison. Instantly, dark battle intent soared into the sky, and within that battle intent, the faint sound of thunder could be heard. The battle intent of the 9 Nether Guards had clearly grown stronger compared to a month ago. Buzz. As the 9 Nether battle intent erupted, Lin Qingfeng also flicked his sleeve, and the sound of countless swords ringing out filled the air. Sword intent like sword chi whirled around him, creating a storm-like effect that spun around Lin Qingfeng. The sharpness of the aura seemed capable of tearing apart the heavens and earth. "Commander Mu, if you want to save someone, then try taking one of my moves." Lin Qingfeng laughed loudly, though his eyes held little mirth. His hand suddenly formed a seal. Sword intent, spirit, sword lotus. Swish. A torrent of sword chi swept out and transformed into a lotus made of sword energy. The sword lotus bloomed slowly, and as it spun, the very space around it was cut with fine, delicate marks. Though the sword lotus was calm, anyone could feel the sharpness hidden beneath that calm. It was clear that Lin Qingfeng wasn't holding back, and his strike was a killing move from the start. Lin Qingfeng looked at Mu Chun indifferently and flicked his finger. The sword lotus shot forward in an instant, leaving afterimages in midair. The sword lotus rapidly expanded in Mu Chun's pupils, Yet there was little change in his expression. His hand moved in a swift and complex gesture, and the immense 9 nether battle will surged within him, transforming into a black fist imprint. Dark thunderous lightning crackled and flickered wildly on the imprint. 9 nether battle will, 9 nether thunder fist. Chen hurled his fist forward. The black fist imprint, surrounded by crackling thunder, shot out like a bolt, colliding fiercely with the sword lotus without any hesitation. Boom! The sword energy and the dark battle will filled with thunder collided, causing the space around them to twist uncontrollably. Shockwaves spread out in all directions, yet they failed to shake the two opposing armies. Countless eyes below stared at the collision in the sky, all showing awe. It was clear to anyone watching that the attacks from the 3,000 sword servants were no match for the 9 nether guards. The 9 nether guards seemed to have become stronger than when they faced the Blood Eagle guards, said one of the strong-eyed spectators, noticing the change in their power. They certainly found the right person. Back when they were under Chao Feng, they didn't have this kind of momentum, another remarked. Nearby, in the sky, Qianlong, the leader of the Golden Guards, watched the confrontation between Lin Qingfeng and Chen with a complex gaze. When Chen first became the leader of the 9 nether guards, Qianlong had privately scoffed, doubting that such a young person could have much ability. But after a series of events, he realized his short-sightedness. Under this young man's leadership, the 9 nether guards, once not well known in the Great Luo Heaven Domain, had slowly begun to shine with brilliant light. Now, they were strong enough to rival powerful forces like the 3,000 sword servants of the Valley of 10,000 Swords. Leader, do we need to assist? Someone behind Qianlong asked. Qianlong shook his head. Lin Qifeng can't do anything to Chen. They won't fight. With his sharp vision, he could see that while Lin Qifeng was formidable, defeating Chen would be no easy task, unless the 3,000 sword servants assembled, which might tip the scales. As Qianlong had predicted, Lin Qifeng, looking at the 9 nether guards that had effortlessly blocked their attacks, furrowed his brow slightly before smiling. It seems the rumors were true. Chen, your reputation is well-deserved. Too much praise. Chen smiled in reply. Since you're stepping in, I naturally must show respect. We'll let the Golden Guards off for today. However, when the time comes for battle, I hope you can remain as calm as you are now, Lin Qifeng said, cupping his hands in a salute. Then, with a flick of his sleeve, he turned and swiftly departed, his movements decisive. Chen watched the retreating figures, his brow furrowing slightly. Lin Qifeng, the chief of the Valley of 10,000 Swords, had proven to be a tricky opponent after their brief exchange. No wonder the Valley of 10,000 Swords is one of the top 3 forces in the 100 Battles domain. They truly have some skill, Chen muttered to himself. It seemed that the upcoming final battle would indeed be earth-shattering. Thank you, Chen. Qianlong's voice broke through his thoughts. He had led the Golden Guards to approach and cupped his fists in gratitude. There's no need for thanks, Qianlong. We are all people of the Great Luo Heaven Domain. It's only right to help, Chen replied, cupping his fists in return. The Flowing Gold King had always been low-key within the Great Luo Heaven Domain, and while Chen's help wouldn't win them eternal gratitude, it would certainly strengthen the relationship between the Flowing Gold Hall and the 9 Nether Palace. A smile appeared on Qianlong's usually stern face, and he found himself feeling more favorable toward Chen. He had seen many so-called young geniuses, but they were all prideful and arrogant. Chen, however, lacked any such haughty air, which explained why he had earned the favor of the 9 Nether King. Since you've arrived, Chen, I assume the 9 Nether King is here too? Haha, this final battle will truly depend on her. Qianlong laughed. Yes, she's already gone ahead to meet the 3 sovereigns. Chen nodded. As one of the 9 kings of the 9 Nether, the 9 Nether King was a top-tier force in the Great Luo Heaven Domain, and her presence was essential for this final battle. Qianlong nodded, about to speak again, when suddenly, from the distant horizon, a deep drumbeat echoed through the air. It's the war drum of 100 Battles Domain. Qianlong's expression tightened, and his face immediately became serious. What's going on? Chen quickly asked. 100 Battles Domain is about to go to war, Qianlong said in a low voice. Chen, Commander, we need to hurry to the main camp. Chen was slightly taken aback. Could it be that 100 Battles Domain was so eager to start the final battle? However, there was no time to think further. He waved his hand, and his figure, along with Qian Long, surged forward, with their two armies following closely behind. The two torrents of soldiers surged through the sky like lightning, and the ancient, deep drumbeats grew louder with each passing moment. After about half an hour of high-speed travel, Chen and Qian Long slowed down. Looking ahead, they saw the protective light shield over 100 Battles City slowly tearing open. Instantly, countless figures surged out like a swarm of locusts, filling the sky and blocking out the sunlight. At the front of this terrifying formation, dark shadows spread as far as the eye could see. Powerful spiritual energy fluctuations shot into the sky, and the violent energy ripples almost caused the very air itself to boil. Two terrifying forces were about to collide head-on. It felt as though the very sky would collapse. Chen couldn't help but let out a deep breath at the sight. Such a final battle was truly overwhelming. Outside 100 Battles City, the sky was dim, and both armies gathered in massive formations. The vast ranks of soldiers almost blotted out the heavens, with countless spiritual energy forces rising into the sky, causing the air itself to stop flowing. It was the confrontation of two colossal forces. Once this battle started, it would be earth-shattering. Countless powerful warriors would fall, and the skies would be stained with blood, such a brutal clash that it could send chills down anyone's spine. Chen led the 9 Nether Guards into the Great Luo Heaven Domain's army. As he gazed at the figures filling the sky above 100 Battles City, his expression turned grim. Only now did he truly understand how strong 100 Battles Domain was. Though there was a slight gap between them and top-tier forces like Great Luo Heaven Domain, such strength would be enough to sweep across the northern heaven continent. If this final battle begins, it might truly be an apocalypse, Chen murmured to himself. He knew that even for the Great Luo Heaven Domain, conquering 100 Battles Domain would come at a great cost. This final battle might not be so easily started. Tang Bing spoke softly beside him. Chen was surprised. Although 100 Battles Domain is showing great strength, they don't have the resolve to fight to the death. If it weren't for Xiantian Palace secretly prodding them, they would never dare provoke the Great Luo Heaven Domain. Tang Bing's eyes sparkled with light, and she smiled softly. If this were any other time, even if Great Luo Heaven Domain had to pay a price, we could still take down 100 Battles Domain, recover quickly, and even grow stronger. But right now isn't the right time. The Grand Hunting War is fast approaching. If we engage in a full-scale battle now, it would not bode well for us. Neither side has the will to fight to the death. So this final battle might be hard to ignite. Chen looked at the confident Tang Bing and couldn't help but rub his nose. So it's all just for show? 100 Battles Domain must be out of their minds, provoking the Great Luo Heaven Domain. They must have reached some sort of agreement with Xiantian Palace. Tang Bing pondered for a moment, then smiled again. But even though they won't fight to the death, things today won't be so easily settled. After all, there are many eyes on this situation. Chen nodded, just about to speak when, in front of the massive army of 100 Battles Domain, 3 figures emerged, immediately drawing the awe and respect of countless powerful individuals from 100 Battles Domain. One of the figures was an old man in green robes, carrying a sword chest on his back. His expression was cold and stern, and his eyes seemed to flow with spiritual sword energy. Just a glance made it hard to meet his gaze. Beside him was a skinny old man in black robes, looking like a dried-up corpse. His entire body was enveloped in a cold, ominous aura, making anyone nearby feel extremely uncomfortable. On the far right stood a middle-aged man with a shaved head. His body was slender, and one hand was raised in front of him. As soon as the 3 figures appeared, the morale of the 100 Battles Domain soared instantly. Deafening cheers echoed through the air, shaking the very heavens and earth. Those are the 3 great powers of the 100 Battles Domain. The elder in the green robe is the leader of the Valley of 10,000 Swords, the Sword Concealment Elder. His strength has reached the 7th grade supreme. The Gaunt Elder is the sect master of the Demon Corpse sect, the Corpse Mountain Ghost, and the last one is the founder of Great Sorrow Heaven, the Sorrowful Demon Supreme. He hails from a lower dimension, but his strength is incredibly unpredictable. In fact, he might be the most unfathomable of the three. Tang Bing said with a serious gaze, looking at the three figures. Upon hearing Tang Bing's words, Mu Chen couldn't help but look at the bald, middle-aged man again. Although lower dimensions are considered inferior to the Great Thousand World, those who manage to break through the dimensional shackles and come to the Great Thousand World are all top-tier experts. The most famous figures from the lower dimensions in the Great Thousand World are undoubtedly the Flame Emperor and the Martial Ancestor. This so-called sorrowful demon supreme also comes from a lower dimension and has created such an empire. A person like that must possess extraordinary abilities. Mu Chen nodded slightly. These three great powers were not any weaker than the three sovereigns of their Great Luo Heaven domain. With such strength, it was no wonder they could control the 100 Battles domain. My old friends, still not planning to show yourselves? After the three giants of the 100 Battles domain made their appearance, the elder in the green robe carrying a sword sheath smiled faintly, his voice resonating in the ears of everyone present. We'll soon meet on the battlefield. An old friend like this isn't to be taken lightly. A familiar, elderly chuckle followed, and three figures appeared in front of the Great Luo Heaven Domain's army. It was none other than their three sovereigns, and the one who spoke was, of course, the Heavenly Vulture Emperor. As soon as the three sovereigns appeared, the morale of the Great Luo Heaven Domain also surged. This time, you're making a mountain out of a molehill. My 100 Battles domain has only seized a few peripheral cities, yet your Great Luo Heaven domain has mobilized such a huge force, said the black-robed elder, his voice hoarse and eerie, resembling a dried-up corpse. As long as it tarnishes the reputation of my Great Luo Heaven domain, it's no small matter. Since your 100 Battles domain has such a provocative heart, you shall naturally bear the consequences. The Spirit Pupil Emperor replied indifferently. The dialogue between the two factions fell silent as everyone allowed these great figures to clash with their words. Although the Great Luo Heaven domain's reputation is vast, we of the 100 Battles domain are not to be trampled upon like soft persimmons. The Sword Concealment Elder of the Valley of 10,000 Swords said with a faint smile. Moreover, if your domain lord does not intervene, relying only on your three sovereigns may not be enough to subdue our 100 Battles domain. So I suggest you bring out your domain lord. The Heavenly Vulture Emperor's brows furrowed slightly, a cold light flashing in his eyes. It seems you're eager to meet me? Before the Heavenly Vulture Emperor could speak, a hoarse voice suddenly rang out across the heavens and earth. As the voice resounded, everyone felt a terrifying pressure descending from the sky, enveloping the area within 1,000 miles in an instant. Everyone's astonished gaze turned to the source of the voice. They saw a brilliant light suddenly coalesce in front of the three sovereigns. The light transformed into a golden throne, and upon that throne sat a figure enveloped in radiant light. Though not particularly imposing in stature, the figure radiated an aura that caused countless powerful beings to be struck silent in awe. Welcome, Domain Lord. The three sovereigns were startled by the Domain Lord's sudden appearance and hurriedly cupped their fists in salute. Behind them, countless powerful figures of the Great Luo Heaven domain also bowed in reverence, their presence shaking the heavens. In stark contrast to the overwhelming pressure from the Great Luo Heaven domain, the 100 Battles domain immediately fell silent. The strong figures' eyes were filled with fear because they knew that in the face of this mysterious domain lord from the Great Luo Heaven domain, even their three great powers would not dare to act recklessly. The Sword Concealment Elder's face stiffened at that moment, especially when he felt a cold, indifferent gaze from the figure on the throne. Even he, with his 7th grade supreme strength, felt a chill rising from his feet. Though he possessed the strength of a 7th grade supreme, it was worlds apart from the domain lord of the Great Luo Heaven domain, who had reached the level of Earth Supreme. It's been many years, domain lord of the Great Luo Heaven. Lu Tiandao looked at the scene before him, his deep gaze slightly narrowing. His expression also became subtly more serious. Although his earlier attack had not been delivered with full force, his goal had already been achieved. To be able to receive his attack so easily, without even the slightest fluctuation in spiritual energy, It was clear that the Great Luo Domain Lord was not in the weakened state he had expected. How could this be? Lu Tiandao's eyes grew slightly colder. His intelligence would never be wrong. The Great Luo Domain Lord should have been on the verge of a burst of internal injuries, leading to extreme weakness. Yet, looking at the current situation, the Great Luo Domain Lord's strength remained intact. It seems that Lord Lu wants to test how much I've improved over the years. As Lu Tiandao's expression subtly shifted, the Great Luo Domain Lord, sitting on his throne, rasped with a voice that caused the very space around them to twist. It's just to see how much you've progressed, Great Luo Domain Lord. Lu Tiandao casually waved his sleeve and smiled faintly. Then, his gaze swept over the vast battlefield, and he continued, but this level of war, with your status, Great Luo Domain Lord, if you were to join, it would be too much of a one-sided affair. My Xintian Palace has deep ties with the 100 Battles domain, so if the Great Luo Domain Lord tries to force his way, my Xintian Palace may not be able to stand idly by. Then today, I'll see what your Xintian Palace is truly capable of. The Great Luo Domain Lord on the throne seemed to sneer slightly, his words showing no hesitation at the thought of Xintian Palace intervening. Lu Tiandao smiled and locked his gaze onto the Great Luo Domain Lord. No need for words like that. Both of us know the situation clearly. If you intend to act, I will have no choice but to stop you. In that case, you still won't be able to intervene. And if you truly wish to have a life or death battle with the 100 Battles domain, I would actually welcome it. The light around the Great Luo Domain Lord flickered slightly. Then he smiled faintly and said, "Then, no more nonsense. If you want to do something, just say it clearly." Lu Tiandao smiled. It's good to see the Great Luo Domain Lord is so straightforward. But I am not the one in charge here. As for how things proceed, you'd better ask the 3 leaders of the 100 Battles domain. Just as Lu Tiandao's words fell, the sword concealment elder from the Valley of 10,000 Swords grinned and cupped his hands toward the Great Luo Domain Lord, saying, "Since neither side is willing to engage in a bloody battle, but the Great Luo Heavenly Domain cannot leave empty-handed, how about we settle it with a duel? This way, we can avoid unnecessary casualties and still reach a conclusion. The loser will compensate the winner with 1 million supreme spiritual liquid and 1,000 cities." What does the Great Luo Domain Lord think? 1 million supreme spiritual liquid? 1,000 cities? The proposed compensation immediately caused an uproar. Even the 3 sovereigns' gazes flickered. 1 million supreme spiritual liquid was a large sum. Though the Great Luo Heavenly Domain could afford it, it was by no means trivial. Moreover, 1,000 cities were of tremendous value. Even if the Great Luo Heavenly Domain were to give them up, it would be quite painful. Mu Chen couldn't help but click his tongue. After they had raided the Thunder Demon sect and taken everything, their total haul hadn't even reached 200,000 supreme spiritual liquid. Yet now, the 100 Battles domain was offering a staggering 1 million supreme spiritual liquid in this wager. The audacity was truly astonishing. The 3 sovereigns looked at the Great Luo Domain Lord, clearly waiting for his decision. Under the scrutiny of countless eyes, the Great Luo Domain Lord paused briefly before his hoarse voice rang out again, without a hint of emotion. "What are the terms of this wager?" "Simple." The sword concealment elder smiled faintly. "The wager consists of 3 battles, an Imperial-level duel, a King-level duel, and a Commander-level duel. That means the Great Luo Heavenly Domain will send 1 Imperial, 1 King, and 1 Commander, and we will do the same. The side that wins more of the 3 battles will be the victor. Why make it so complicated? The 3 leaders of the 100 Battles domain can fight at once, and the 3 sovereigns and I will take them on directly. Isn't that more straightforward? Are you all lacking confidence?" The Heavenly Vulture Emperor said with a light smile. "Yeah, that would be too boring. In this kind of setting, we should at least leave some space for the younger generation," the Sword Concealment Elder said with a sly grin. The Heavenly Vulture Emperor frowned slightly, then looked at the Great Luo Domain Lord on the throne. The method proposed by the Sword Concealment Elder had added more unpredictability to the duel. The light surrounding the Great Luo Domain Lord flickered once more, and a gaze seemed to sweep across the many powerful figures of the Great Luo Heavenly Domain. Indeed, The Great Luo Domain Master is quite a man of resolve, the Sword Concealment Elder complimented with a smile. Send out all 3 of your experts from the 100 Battles domain. I'd like to see what gives you the confidence, the Great Luo Domain Master said indifferently. Hearing this, the Sword Concealment Elder smiled but didn't speak. Before he could, the Great Sorrow Heaven's top leader, the Sorrowful Demon Supreme, who had been silent all along, suddenly took a step forward. His eyes, as deep as galaxies, fixed on the Great Luo Domain Master, and his voice was as calm as an ancient well. I, as a royal-level expert from the Great Luo Heaven Domain, will take on the challenge. Seeing him step forward, the Sword Concealment Elder and the Corpse Mountain Ghost merely smiled without objection, seemingly expecting this. As expected, it's the Sorrowful Demon Supreme who will make a move, Tang Bing said, her delicate face becoming much more serious. Among the 3 giants of the 100 Battles domain, while the Sorrowful Demon Supreme was the most low-key, he was clearly the most inscrutable. Mu Chen nodded gently. This Sorrowful Demon Supreme was indeed no ordinary opponent. Once the Sorrowful Demon Supreme stepped forward, the Sword Concealment Elder waved his hand again. Instantly, cracks spread throughout the massive group behind him, and a shadow slowly emerged. With the appearance of the shadow, a foul stench of decay filled the air. As everyone looked, they saw a frail figure, its entire body wrapped in black bandages, resembling a mummy. There seemed to be many strange symbols flickering on the black cloth. At the sight of this eerie figure, an uproar echoed through the air. That's the Corpse Spirit King from the Demon Corpse sect. Hasn't he been missing for years? How is he back? Tang Bing exclaimed in surprise. Corpse Spirit King. Mu Chen was taken aback. He's the Grand Elder of the Demon Corpse sect, said to be second only to the Corpse Mountain Ghost. He disappeared a few years ago, and many thought he had perished. I never expected him to still be alive, Tang Bing explained. Mu Chen frowned. The Corpse Spirit King gave off a particularly unsettling vibe. I wonder who the 100 Battles domain will send for their leader-level expert. Mu Chen muttered, more interested in this, as this was within his range of capability. The 100 Battles domain will definitely choose the strongest leader, and they only have 3 choices. Lin Qingfeng from the Valley of 10,000 Swords, Mo from the Demon Corpse sect, and Qin Bei from Great Sorrow Heaven. Among them, Lin Qingfeng is the most famous, Mo is the most devious, and Qin Bei is the most low-key, Tang Bing replied. Mu Chen nodded lightly, processing the information. But don't get your hopes up. For this commander duel, the Great Luo Domain probably won't let you participate, Tang Bing smiled at Mu Chen. Not that I'm discouraging you, but Su Qing and Zhou Yu have too much influence. Although you've risen quickly, many still trust them more, so the Domain Master will likely choose one of them. Mu Chen rubbed his nose and smiled. Su Qing and Zhou Yu are both powerful. If they take the lead, I won't complain. It saves me the trouble of fighting myself. Glad to hear you've come to terms with it. We all know you're no weaker than them, Tang Bing said with a sweet smile, trying to comfort him. Mu Chen shrugged and then looked up. The Sword Concealment Elder waved his hand again, signaling the leader-level expert from the 100 Battles domain to step forward. At the back, 3 figures were already hovering in midair. One of them was Lin Qingfeng, whom Mu Chen had seen before. On either side of him stood Mo, dressed in dark attire, and the most reserved one, Qin Bei, wearing a black-green robe and a bald head. He was the least noticeable of the 3. When the Sword Concealment Elder made his gesture, Lin Qingfeng and Mo exchanged a glance, as if sneering, and then both stepped back, allowing the half-closed-eyed Qin Bei to step forward. It was clear that the leader-level expert chosen by the 100 Battles domain was Qin Bei. They really chose him, Tang Bing said, her brows furrowing slightly. Among the 3 major forces of the 100 Battles domain, while Great Sorrow Heaven was always low-key, it was undoubtedly the most difficult to deal with. Great Luo Domain Master, the 100 Battles domain has made their choice. How about your domain? Which 3 will you send? The Sword Concealment Elder asked with a smile. Countless eyes turned to the Great Luo Domain Master on his throne. His body flickered with light, and he lazily leaned against the throne. His voice drifted out, calm as ever. Among the 3 emperors, the sleeping king, who had always appeared half asleep, opened his eyes. He glanced at the distant sorrowful demon supreme, seemingly smiled, and then nodded. Clearly, the Great Luo Heaven Domain had chosen the same elusive sleeping king to deal with the sorrowful demon supreme. Xun'er King. The Great Luo Domain Master spoke again. This selection wasn't unexpected. After all, Xun'er King was the strongest among the 9 kings. After the choice of Xun'er King, the voice of the Great Luo Heaven Domain paused for a moment, and then countless gazes shifted to Su Qing and Zhou Yu. However, the two of them remained composed, with no noticeable change in expression. The Great Luo Domain Master gently tapped his throne, his gaze sweeping over Su Qing and Zhou Yu with a penetrating look, as if he could see through their hearts. Then, suddenly, his eyes shifted and directly landed on Mu Chun, who was gently closing his eyes to rest. Mu Chun. A soft voice rang out, drawing astonished reactions from many. Even the distant 9 Nether was shocked, looking over in disbelief. Clearly, no one had expected the Great Luo Domain Master to choose the youngest Mu Chun. Mu Chun. As the hoarse voice of the Great Luo Domain Master echoed, the entire Great Luo Heaven Domain fell silent for a moment, and then a low murmur of astonishment spread through the crowd. Everyone stared in surprise at Mu Chun, who also wore a dazed expression. Su Qing and Zhou Yu were momentarily stunned. They exchanged a glance, their lips twitching slightly, but ultimately, neither of them spoke. After all, this was the direct choice of the Great Luo Domain Master, and they didn't dare to object. However, although they remained silent, the slight doubt in their eyes was unmistakable. While they had witnessed Mu Chen's battle with Wu Tian and knew that the young man was not as simple as he appeared, Mu Chun had relied on the battle intent of the 9 Nether Guards in that fight. But the upcoming battle would depend entirely on the commander's own abilities, and this caused some skepticism among the crowd. The murmurs of surprise spread. Of course, not just others were stunned. Even Mu Chun couldn't help but slightly open his mouth, then looked at Tang Bing beside him with a strange expression. She, too, had the same look on her face. It was clear that she never expected Mu Chun to be chosen by the Great Luo Domain Master. Despite the many doubts in their eyes, the authority of the Great Luo Domain Master was overwhelming, and no one dared to voice their objections. The momentary chaos that followed was replaced by an eerie silence, making the atmosphere feel strangely dissonant. 9 Nether cast Mu Chun a peculiar glance, hesitated for a moment, and then clasped her fists and said, "Domain Master, Mu Chen's experience is still too shallow. Wouldn't it be too risky for him to take the field?" The upcoming 3 duels were extremely important. Therefore, the selected individuals would face immense pressure. If they won, it would be fine, but if they lost, the pressure they'd face would be unimaginable. Although 9 Nether wanted Mu Chun to stand out in this war, she didn't want to put him in such a dangerous situation. Hearing her words, the Great Luo Domain Master casually waved his hand, smiling lightly. "It's fine, he's the one." Seeing that the Great Luo Domain Master was firm in his decision, 9 Nether could only remain silent. There was a peculiar look in her eyes, though. She couldn't understand why the Domain Master was paying such close attention to Mu Chun. Logically speaking, Mu Chen's current strength didn't seem worthy of the Domain Master's attention. Seeing this, the others also refrained from speaking. The Domain Master's words carried absolute authority in the Great Luo Heaven Domain. Since he had made his decision, no one dared to oppose it. Thus, the candidate for the commander duel was settled on Mu Chun. Countless strong figures in the Great Luo Heaven Domain exchanged glances, all inwardly sighing. Now, all they could do was hope they could win the first 2 rounds. If that happened, the outcome of Mu Chen's duel wouldn't matter. Faced with the numerous incredulous gazes, Mu Chun could only helplessly twitch his lips. He, too, didn't know why the Great Luo Domain Master had insisted on having him fight. It seems the Great Luo Domain Master has already chosen his candidate. The Sword Concealment Elder chuckled. His gaze swept over the half-asleep sleeping king, and a trace of caution flickered in his eyes. It seemed he was well aware that, of the 3 emperors in the Great Luo Heaven Domain, the sleeping king was the most unfathomable. His gaze then shifted to Xun'er King, who was clad in battle armor, his expression neutral. However, beneath his seemingly calm eyes, there was an undercurrent of terrifying killing intent, enough to send a chill down one's spine. Among the 9 kings of the Great Luo Heaven Domain, Xun'er King's strength was undeniably the strongest. The Sword Concealment Elder's gaze finally settled on Chen. His expression froze for a moment. Second Great Supreme? When did the leader of the Great Luo Heaven Domain become this weak? A flicker of doubt passed through the Sword Concealment Elder's eyes, but he did not show it. Instead, he smiled and said, "Since the candidates have been chosen, let the Great Luo Domain Master decide the order of the duels." Radiant light surged around the Great Luo Heaven Domain, and it seemed as if the gaze was cast towards the sleeping king. The latter leisurely stepped forward and said with a smile, "Let's start with the strongest." With a single step, he appeared high in the sky. Then, he turned his gaze to the sorrowful Demon Supreme and said, "I've heard that the sorrowful Demon Supreme was a prodigy who broke through the dimensional shackles in the past. I'm fortunate to have the chance to experience it firsthand today." The sorrowful Demon Supreme smiled in response. His figure rippled slightly, and he vanished mysteriously, only to reappear like a wave, materializing in front of the sleeping king. I've also heard that Brother Ming's great dream divine scripture can be cultivated in the state between sleep and wakefulness. Truly extraordinary. I hope to receive your guidance today, the sorrowful Demon Supreme said, his eyes like a galaxy, staring at the sleeping king as he spoke slowly. "Certainly," the sleeping king replied with a smile. However, the drowsy look in his eyes quickly vanished, replaced by a sharp, dazzling gleam that made others feel somewhat dizzy. He waved his sleeve, and the originally blue sky twisted in an instant. A terrifying pressure, strong enough to crush the sky, spread across the surroundings, enveloping everything. Boom, boom. Above the 9 heavens, all the clouds shattered instantly. The surrounding space distorted, and terrifying spatial rifts appeared, slashing through the air. Then, the sleeping king reached out his hand, and the dark rifts appeared within his grasp. They looked like little dark snakes, but only those with sharp eyes could understand the immense power hidden in these spatial rifts. That was the power of space. Control over space, 8th Great Supreme. Countless powerful figures gasped in awe. To control the power of space at will was something only an 8th Great Supreme could do. Clearly, the sleeping king had already reached the 8th grade. Behind him, the Heavenly Vulture Emperor and Spirit Pupil Emperor exchanged helpless smiles. It seemed that the sleeping king had gotten ahead of them. While they were now close to stepping into the 8th Great Supreme realm, there was still a significant gap before reaching it. Truly worthy of the sleeping king, Tang Bing couldn't help but praise. Based on her previous knowledge, the 3 emperors were all around the 7th Great Supreme. But clearly, that information was outdated. Chen also nodded slightly. He looked up at the figure standing in midair. The power radiating from it was truly capable of destroying the heavens and earth. Amidst the amazement of those watching, the sleeping king smiled faintly at the sorrowful Demon Supreme and flicked his finger. The dark little snakes in his hand vanished mysteriously. Boom. At the moment the dark spatial snakes disappeared, the space around the sorrowful Demon Supreme suddenly distorted. Then, the space tore open, and sinister, dark spatial rifts appeared, like scissors of space, immediately rushing toward the sorrowful Demon Supreme's body. This attack didn't have the overwhelming force of spiritual energy clashing, but its danger was far greater. The power contained within these spatial rifts was enough to tear apart a 5th Great Supreme in an instant. More importantly, such an attack was almost impossible to dodge. No matter how fast one was, they couldn't compare to the speed at which space could be torn apart. As the spatial rifts tore toward him, the sorrowful Demon Supreme didn't change his expression. With one hand raised in front of him, he smiled faintly. Immediately, the space around his body twisted, and similarly sinister spatial rifts emerged. They collided with the incoming rifts. SSS. SSS. The subtle sounds of the rifts colliding echoed in the sky. The rifts canceled each other out, without any explosive force. Controlling space? That sorrowful Demon Supreme has also reached the 8th grade. People around them exclaimed in shock. Clearly, the sorrowful Demon Supreme possesses the strength of an 8th grade Supreme. This guy really lives up to his reputation as someone who broke free from the shackles of the lower dimension, Tang Bing said, her brows furrowing tightly. It seems we're in for a fierce battle to determine the victor, Chen remarked with a serious expression. No wonder the sorrowful demon supreme was chosen to deal with their side's royal-level powerhouses. He had hidden much of his strength. This 8th grade supreme was probably the strongest among the 3 giants of the 100 Battles domain. This is getting interesting. It's been years since I last fought. Hope I haven't gotten rusty. The sleeping king chuckled as he watched. However, his eyes grew sharper. A foe like this was finally worth taking seriously. Please, dream brother, teach me. The sorrowful demon supreme smiled, though his eyes betrayed no emotion. The sleeping king smiled, and then gently closed his eyes. As he did, the vast space behind him began to twist and distort. That area seemed to transform into a black hole, wildly devouring the spiritual energy between heaven and earth. As the spiritual energy converged into dazzling arcs of light, a massive figure, around several thousand zhang in height, slowly began to take shape. This figure sat cross-legged in the air, its entire body enveloped in brilliant light. Yet, it was not a mere illusion. As the light flickered, it was indistinguishable from a real, solid entity, a true giant. Moreover, coiling around this giant's body was a golden, colossal dragon. The dragon was perched on the figure's form, its head raised high as though it was about to swallow the heavens and earth. At the appearance of this massive figure, the sky trembled, seemingly unable to bear the immense pressure. Roar! The golden colossal dragon let out a deafening roar, its dragon cry reverberating through the heavens. The golden sound waves spread out, and in an instant, the sky and earth began to collapse. Below, Chen gazed up at the enormous figure and the golden dragon winding around it.